Welcome to this edition of The Talk of Simsbury, a show that focuses on particularly pressing or interesting issues facing the town. My name is Dominique Avery. Today we're going to talk about the issue of suicide, how to prevent it, and the stigma associated with suicide. This is an extremely pressing issue. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S., more than homicides or car accidents. In Connecticut, there are about 371 suicides a year. That's more than one a day. And as we will learn in this program, the town of Simsbury is not immune. Joining us for this discussion is Tom Steen, a Simsbury resident and the executive director of the Capital Area Substance Abuse Council. That's a mouthful. And First Selectman Mary Glassman is here as well. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
We are doing this show in September because it's Suicide Prevention Month, and Simsbury is mobilizing to address the issue with a training session on September 19th for local people who could be instrumental in preventing suicide. Mary Glassman is here because she's taken a strong interest in the subject and has been instrumental in helping the town begin to face the issue head on. Mary, I wanted to start with you and ask what particularly interested you in this subject and what motivated you to get this training session started in a grant, etc.
Well, thank you, Dominique. Thanks for having us today. It's great to be here with Tom, who's been so helpful in this initiative. We're so proud that Simsbury is part of starting this conversation. As you said, the statistics are difficult to hear. We all have some experience with communities that have lost people. We really wanted to make sure that Simsbury was healthy. And we have a lot of programs that we provide and we offer, but we really thought we could do more, we should do more. We wanted to be able to talk about this and to let our residents know that we're here to help and we want to be a caring community. So we heard about Tom's organization and heard about a grant that would provide this training and educate us all on how to have this conversation, how to prevent the statistics and how to take action. And we applied for the grant. We're very grateful that Tom is going to work with us, and not only is he does a great job at his organization, but he's also a local resident. So it was great to have him be part of our community. So we first step was to contact the organizations and see if there was support to have this conversation all across our community.
You mean the organizations who have people who could be on the front line?
Exactly. And so we were thrilled that everyone we asked was at the table and wanted to be part of this conversation. Everyone from the superintendent of schools to the Board of Education to the Board of Selectmen to our local church leaders to our local community groups, the Simsbury Chamber of Commerce. So we have broad-based support to begin this conversation and to let our community know that we're all in this together and we all want to do a better job of providing help or being supportive or whatever we can do. So once we heard of Tom's organization and grants, we immediately applied for the grant. We did get funding, and so our first training session will be September 19th, and we'll be learning, well, Tom will tell you the details, but we'll be learning how to educate ourselves, how to talk about suicide, how to recognize suicide among our family members, among our neighbors, among our coworkers, to how to connect those folks with support and help, and where to get that support and help, and then how to work with families that are experiencing this tragedy. So we're really excited to take this conversation out of the closet because I think people do feel uncomfortable talking about it. But now that we've announced that the training sessions are coming, we've been really thrilled with the amount of people who want to participate, phone calls from folks reaching out that have had experiences that want to share with us. And so we really think this is going to really lead to some positive community conversation.
Before I go into Tom, I just want to point out that this show is going to air during the whole month of September, and the training is on the 19th. So not everybody who sees this show is going to be able to take part, so I just wanted people to be aware of that.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Dominique, because this is the beginning of the conversation, it's not the end. So while the training session is the first step in educating community leaders on how to have this conversation, it's really the beginning of a process and a program to involve the public, to involve the community of what we need to do next to make sure that our community is healthy and to make sure that we support each other and connect individuals with programs and support that they need.
Tom, I know that you know firsthand about suicide, that your son died by suicide while he was in college, and I know that you firmly believe that suicide is preventable, and that's the whole point of your work, right?
That's correct. After my son died, there was very much sadness and grief and some anger, and once you find yourself to be able to get your hands around what has happened to our family, I began to think, what can I do to take a bad situation and make it into something positive? And an opportunity a couple of years ago was afforded me to be the executive of the organization that I'm with, and that this suicide prevention initiative was rolling out across the state and now to communities. And it was my opportunity to say, here's how I can give back so that families don't have to walk the same path my family or myself have.
Now, I understand that it's your opinion, and the whole point of this is that suicide is preventable.
Yes, it's the most preventable death we know in our society. There are ways to, and through our training and our programming, we hope to educate the community on the warning signs, how to ask the question, take the quotes around the S word so that we're talking about suicide freely. And then once somebody says they need help, well, what do you do? How do you get them to the right place so that they can get the right kind of help? The type of training and hopefully education that we provide across the community is training for everybody. You don't have to be a social worker to be able to ask somebody if they're in trouble, and then really what to do to get them to the professionals that can truly help them, so that we save a life.
So essentially the training that you're going to do is help people recognize someone who is suicidal?
Yeah.
And the warning signs, perhaps?
Yeah, it's really kind of a 3 to 4 stage approach to it. It really is educating people about the myths and the facts of suicide. The second point is then educating people on the risk factors and the signs that people display when they become to get in trouble and could be potentially suicidal, and then to ask the question so that you can refer, you can literally hold this person's hand and bring them to a place where they can get help and get back to health again.
It's such a difficult issue, though. I mean, I had a personal experience a few months ago. Somebody who I hired at a job years and years ago called me up out of the blue, and we had lunch together, and he was thrilled to see me and very emotional, and then told me that he'd had mental issues for a long time, and then tried to get me to see him again, and I was a little nervous about it. I emailed him several times afterwards, never heard back from him, and then I heard that he died, and I suspect that he committed suicide. I have felt terribly guilty, and don't people feel guilty?
Yeah, I think that's one of the human nature is when a tragedy occurs, I think we all ask ourselves, what more could we have done? What more could we have said? And I think the point of Tom's training and educating all of us is there is a lot you can do. And it's just getting ourselves comfortable and getting the people around us comfortable that there are people out there who care, and there are programs out there, and there's a lot of help, there's a lot of support, that we do care. And so what we're trying to do is have the community reach out and do something now before the tragedy occurs.
So who is this training aimed at? You mentioned all kinds of people, not just social workers, schools, veterans groups, senior centers. Who are you looking to come to this?
The grant, the grant dollars that we've gotten to do this initiative come from the Department of Mental Health and Addictive Services, our state
DEMIS.
DEMIS,
Right?
DEMIS. They received a grant from the federal government called the Jarrett Lee Smith Grant, which is really a campus initiative for suicide prevention. But Connecticut has been fortunate. This is the second round of funding for them, and it has been really engaged in campuses quite a bit across the state. So there was some resources left, and they said, well, what do we do? Well, let's take this whole initiative to the community. And thus, here we are today. We hope that 45 communities across the state, such as Simsbury, have the same experience and learn about the warning signs. You talked about your associate, and there are warning signs and there are cues that you learn through this training. And if you see one that might be something to think about, but the more you see, the more at risk they are, and then we educate folks. And this again, I'm a sergeant. I don't have MSW. What kind of a spin I use. I'm just an everyday person trying to affect a serious health issue that we have in our country, and by knowing the signs and knowing how to talk to somebody about suicide, how to ask them straight away, are you suicidal? Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Oh my God, that's shocking to even say that.
But we know from research, and this is all evidence-based research, that the person who is considering suicide is asked directly like that. It's like lifting a huge weight off their shoulder. That's, somebody really cares for me, and then the conversation begins, and well, let's go, I can help you, let's find a place where you can get the necessary help, and I'll be with you every step of the way. Could, not all the time, but could save a life and bring somebody to a place where they can find health, and especially mental health. One of the things that we know about suicide, especially here in recent years, that suicide is a symptom of usually one or two things that are going on in somebody's life. It's a depression, or it's bipolar disease, and many times connected with substance abuse, because this person is feeling so depressed and drained, they self-medicate. And now you have two problems stacked onto one, and it creates. We know in talking to people who have survived suicide attempts that it's a deep hole that they're in, and they can't find their way out. So just by merely asking the question straight away, this is wow.
It's a good idea. I'm going to interrupt you here. We're going to take a short break, during which you're going to see a couple of public service announcements prepared by the state's suicide prevention campaign. It's called One Word, One Voice, and One Life. Don't go away.
In Connecticut, suicide is the third leading cause of death for youths between the ages of 10 and 24. Risk factors are alcohol abuse, past suicide attempts, traumatic loss, and public humiliation. Warning signs are feeling hopeless, trapped, withdrawn or isolated, a loss of interest, or wanting to die. Help is available. Be the one to start the conversation.
In 2009, older adults had the second highest suicide death rate in Connecticut. Risk factors are recent death of a loved one, physical illness, depression, and changes in social roles such as retirement. Warning signs are loss of interest in activities and self-care, breaking medical regimens, feeling worthless, and making changes to will. Help is available. Be the one to start the conversation.
We're back. We're talking about a very difficult issue, suicide. I think of myself as a person who can talk about anything, but this is a very difficult subject. Right, Mary?
It is. And in putting together our training, we wanted to make sure we had the right people at the table to start the conversation. And we looked to Tom to say who should be at the table. And it's a broad spectrum of folks who are on the front lines. We wanted to make sure the schools were at the table, so our youth were part of the conversation. We wanted to make sure that our seniors, because there are statistically a high number of seniors that are suffering with mental health issues. Want to make sure our veterans, we've heard anecdotally, and we've seen experiences where a lot of our servicemen and women coming back unprepared and not connected to the services. So maybe Tom can talk a little bit about all facets of our community that really need to be at the table and addressing this important issue.
Yeah, the training that we're going to offer is lifespan training, so it really covers the spectrum of the community. And one of the things we asked each one of the towns when they applied for the grant is to look at 12 different sectors in the community. And I'm going to go through all 12 of them. But they, just as Mary said, they include Board of Education, first responders, police, firemen, social service programs, youth serving organizations. Those folks, as well as seniors and young people, moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, those people who have a connection to the community and know what's going on in the community, so that once the initial training's over, the funding is being provided to allow the town to create programs that can continue the conversation, whether it's having more trainings like we're going to have here in a few weeks, or it's a broader communication education program, whether it's with our faculty at the school or with our town employees, police and fire, to understand the risks factors connected with suicide and some of the things that we all can do, not just as a particular sector, but as a community as a whole, to help people who find themselves in this deep hole on how do we get them out.
And there are a lot of places that people can go for help right now. You don't have to wait till after the training. You know, our schools provide support, our town provides support. We have confidential, private support through our social service department, so you can confidentially contact our social service director and get help. Our churches are very supportive. So we found that a lot of folks don't know that help is out there.
Right.
And so that's where we can do more in letting the community know that we want to be part of the solution.
But isn't the issue also, Tom mentioned earlier, that people who are in this spiral, this downward spiral, fall into a deep hole, and isn't it difficult for them to reach out, see a number on TV to call, or they hear this and, you know,
well, we hope
it's not
to change
for me.
that. You know, this conversation that we're having, maybe someone who's watching right now will say, I need help, and we'll pick up the phone and confidentially call one of us, and we can connect them with those services, or contact a clergy member, or contact a school teacher. So we're hoping that by bringing this conversation out of the dark into the light, that folks will connect and reach out for support.
Okay, so that raises the issue of suicide. I know there are people who say that in the mental health field, suicide is the last taboo, that there's something, people don't talk about it. If they know someone who has died by suicide, they're embarrassed to talk about it. What can be done to change that fear of talking about it? 2
words: communication and education. We have to communicate as a community to feel it's okay to talk about it. You know, several years back, we wouldn't talk about incest as a community, but now we talk about it. Drug addiction, alcoholism, all of those were taboo conversations in our society at one time. Well, just as you said, suicide's kind of that last one, or maybe the last one. And so by having the conversation and getting folks to feel more comfortable about the issue of suicide is that the opportunity to educate and to do the warning signs, the risk factors, and how do you help somebody to direct them to the right place so that they can find health and wellness through their depression or their struggles or their suicidal thoughts or tendencies. They are a lot of services, and this is the best way to get that conversation going, so that, wow, now folks know where to go. I can speak only about my my personal experience when my son Tyler died. We didn't know where to go. You know, thank God for friends and family and people in our lives that helped us through it. And though you never get over suicide, you learn to live with it, and you learn to embrace the goodness and the positive of it all. And by having the conversation and getting folks to understand it's okay to talk about suicide, it will certainly help for services to kind of come out. I'm absolutely amazed at the services that are now available across our state, not only in Simsbury, across our state, for people not only who are struggling with suicidal thought or tendency, but for family survivors who have experienced it. So, you know, having that conversation and then beginning the education process is where it's at.
And I think having a conversation about services for depression, seniors who are living alone, isolated. As a community, what can we do to make sure that, you know, we create programs where neighbors are checking on neighbors, where neighbors know neighbors, where we check in on a senior, you know, make sure that, you know, those food services or other things are available, are happening, or connecting. So it doesn't have to get to the point where hopefully we get in at the early stage where people start having a problem, and maybe they can reach out at the early stage. I mean, that would be our goal, is to let people know that we're a resource, confidential resource, and programs are available for a lot of different issues that families struggle with. And it's okay to reach out and connect with someone who could support you. And
sorry, in the very beginning I said something about suicide being a problem in Simsbury.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of people think, oh, there's nothing like that here, but it is an issue, isn't it?
It is an issue in every community in Connecticut, and we all know of folks that we know, like Tom, whose family has been personally affected. And it was interesting because in planning for our training sessions, I asked Tom, what is the proper response when a family is struck by a tragedy, when this happens? And I think people are afraid to reach out because are you imposing on a family that's grieving, or is it better to reach out? And you know, that's things we need to be educated about too. And Tom said,
educate us. What is the proper response?
It was a pretty significant moment Mary and I had. The families all that go through this all suffer in their own ways. There's no exact same. But you know, you want to stay connected to the family. That's where the healing begins, is when there's people out there that you know that care for you. And the families, my family too, for sure, when they're ready, they will connect. You know, so if it's 4 weeks out, it's 6 weeks out after the tragedy, knowing that, the family knowing that there's a community around that's ready to reach out and help, and is just a healing thing, so that when the family is ready to talk and ready to reach out for help and support.
But like, let me go back to the first thing. Mary has an office in town, and I'm sure when there is a death in town, the office sends a letter or goes to a service or something. But I bet Mary doesn't quite know what to do and what to say.
Well, we don't. And that was one of the purposes I asked Tom, you know, asked the question is, what is the right thing for a community to do in a situation like this? And that's part of what we're going to be educated on. It's okay for us to reach out, because I think we were hesitant, and we wanted the family to have privacy or to grieve privately, and we felt it was an intrusion of the town to come in, or you know, to reach out. And I think a lot of folks feel like we did, that, you know, we're here, and when they're ready they'll reach out. But I think through the training we're going to learn that it's okay for us to reach out, because like Tom says, to let them know we care, and we do. We're a very caring community. It's okay for us to take that step.
But aren't some families so terribly embarrassed? And
yes. Yes.
But that's what we're trying to change.
Right.
And I think, you know, through the healing process of having such a significant loss, survivors hit milestones, and some families will take advantage. I've spoken to so many in the past 3.5 years that are on the same journey as I and my wife and my other 2 sons are on. We all deal with it in different ways, and some families will just deny it, and they're comfortable with that, and you know what, that's okay. But then there are other families, such as my family, who went through a process, and at least for myself, I can speak for myself, is to go public and say, you know, we need to do something about this. And you know, my son Tyler is a great young man. He went to Simsbury High School. He was a shining star, and he's the angel in heaven for me now, who Simsbury respected and was honored to have, and we lost them. And we got to find ways not to lose those young people, or anybody who is suffering. So having a path to where a community can break away the stigma and have a place where communication and education happens is absolutely the way to go. And you'll see that whether it's a surviving family or it's somebody in real trouble that needs help, will feel more comfortable to come forward. The stigma won't be as heavy as it is maybe to some now.
Why do you think there's such a stigma?
You know, I through my training and through my conversations with many people, it's hundreds of reasons. You know, there's religious reasons, there's social or societal reasons, depending on where culture you come from. There's just hundreds of reasons why the subject is kind of buried under the ground, if you will.
I think people don't know how to help. We don't know what the right way to help is, and that's what we hope the training and the education will teach us. And you know, to let people know it's okay to come forward and ask for help. It's okay for us to reach out and offer help. It's okay for us.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you. We have 1 minute. So just each one of you has about 30 seconds, just the top things that you want people who have watched this show to take away and to remember, just the top few things.
Okay,
Mary?
well, thank you for having us. We want to be a healthy community. We want to be a community that cares. If you need help, we want you to reach out. If you know someone who needs help, we want to reach out, and we hope to begin this conversation to say it's okay to talk about.
And is there a number that they should call?
You can call Town Hall, call my office at 860-658-3230, and we'll connect you to the right person.
Tom?
For those who are listening to the show today, if you find yourself in a place where you feel hopelessness and helplessness, there are people out in the world that love you and will help you to find hope and happiness. But you need to reach out and ask for it. And Simsbury is going to be ready to do that.
That's an excellent message, and I think we'll end on that. That was terrific. And our time is up. And I'd like to thank everyone here at SCTV, our director and camera people, and the office for their help in getting the show on the air. And thanks especially to Mary and Tom, my guests, for being here to talk about this very difficult subject. And finally, thank you for joining us. If you missed any part of this show, you can always watch it on our website, simsburytv.org. And you can also find our program schedule there. And if you have missed it, you can catch up with us on Twitter or like us on Facebook, and we'll be back the next time there is something to talk about on the Talk of Simsbury. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.